Ginger Rios walked into the record store with a dream in her hand and never came out, while her husband, Brian Rios, waited just outside, unaware that those few minutes would change his life forever. What began as a routine afternoon in Las Vegas quickly unraveled into a chilling mystery, one that exposed a hidden basement, a predator in plain sight, and a trail of secrets buried deeper than anyone imagined. Ginger Rios had always believed she was meant for something greater. Born and raised in a quiet Arizona suburb, she grew up singing in church choirs and performing at local talent shows. Her passion for music was evident early on, and those who knew her described her as a gentle soul with a fire in her heart. She had a dreamy smile, soft red curls, and a voice that could hush a room. When she met Brian Rios at a community event, it felt like fate. He was grounded, supportive, and shared her ambition. The two married within a year, bound by love and the shared goal of turning her talent into a career. Las Vegas, with its neon lights and non-stop energy, seemed like the perfect launchpad. In early 1998, Ginger and Brian packed up their lives and moved to the city, renting a modest apartment just off the Strip. By day, Ginger worked part-time at a diner, and by night she chased down open mics, handing out demo CDs and performing whenever she got the chance. Brian, ever the loyal partner, acted as her manager, booking gigs and networking with club owners. They weren't rich, but they were happy, living on dreams, coffee, and faith. On April 4th, the couple planned a casual day of errands and promo drops. One of the stops was a small independent record store located in a quiet strip mall, a place Ginger had read about in a local zine. She believed it was the kind of place that supported upcoming artists. Around 2:30 p.m., they pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. Brian waited in the car while Ginger walked into the shop, demo tape in hand, full of hope. She told him she'd only be a few minutes, but time passed. 10 minutes turned into 20. Brian's initial patience gave way to unease. He walked inside the store, expecting to see Ginger chatting with a clerk or browsing the aisles. Instead, the man behind the counter looked up blankly and said he hadn't seen her. He claimed she had already left. Confused and alarmed, Brian searched the aisles, checked the restrooms, and even stepped out to see if she'd gone to a nearby shop. There was no sign of her. He began to ask neighboring businesses if they had seen a red-haired woman in a white blouse and jeans. No one had. The sun began to lower in the sky, and panic settled in his chest. Brian called the police and filed a report. Officers took down the details but offered little more than a standard response: adults sometimes leave on their own. But Brian knew Ginger wouldn't. She had no reason to vanish, especially not midday in a random record store. Her phone was off, her wallet left untouched in the car, and her excitement that morning had been real. As night fell over Las Vegas, one thing became chillingly clear: Ginger Rios had disappeared without a trace. The investigation into Ginger Rios's disappearance began slowly, like many missing persons cases involving adults. The initial theory was that she may have walked away voluntarily or gotten lost in the city. Las Vegas was a place of chaos, illusions, and distractions. People came and went every day. But Brian Rios refused to accept that narrative. He insisted something terrible had happened. His wife was not the type to vanish. She was cautious, deeply committed to her music, and most of all, she never would have left without telling him. Police officers returned to the record store that same evening. The store owner, Derek Hall, appeared calm and cooperative. He claimed that Ginger had left the shop shortly after arriving, saying she had another place to be. He didn't remember the exact time and said business had been slow that day, so he hadn't paid close attention. Detectives took a quick look around and found nothing immediately suspicious. No sign of struggle, no blood, and no witnesses. They checked security cameras from neighboring stores and gas stations. That was when things started to shift. Surveillance footage clearly showed Ginger entering the record store just after 2:30 p.m. She looked relaxed, smiling, holding a small folder likely containing her demo tape. But what was strange was what didn't appear next. The cameras never captured her leaving. No footage showed her exiting the front door or walking across the parking lot. It was as if she had stepped inside and vanished into thin air. Investigators returned to the store with more pointed questions. They noticed a rear exit, mostly hidden from the public and leading into a shadowy alleyway. There were no security cameras back there. When asked about it, Derek said the back door was rarely used and kept locked. But officers tested it. It wasn't locked at all. Inside the narrow back hallway was a door that led to a small basement area. Derek claimed it was used for storage and that he hadn't been down there in weeks. At the time, there was no probable cause for a search, so the basement was left untouched. Brian continued to push the media for attention. He appeared on local news, pleading for information. Flyers with Ginger's photo went up all over the city. Volunteers combed parks, alleys, and stretches of desert on the city's edge. But days passed with no new leads. Ginger's name was now on national missing persons databases, but there were no credit card charges, no phone activity, and no signs of travel. It was like she had been erased. Then, something subtle but unsettling caught an officer's attention. In the store's back room, the faint scent of bleach lingered in the air. The floor appeared freshly cleaned in a way that didn't match the rest of the dusty shop. A small patch of discolored concrete was noted but not tested yet. It was filed away as suspicious but inconclusive. What no one knew at that moment was that they were standing directly above the secret that would eventually unravel the entire case. A full week after Ginger Rios disappeared, the case took a dramatic turn. A woman named Tasha Reynolds, who had briefly worked at the record store months earlier, came forward after seeing the story on local news. She told detectives that her time at the store had been short because the owner, Derek Hall, gave her an uneasy feeling. He was polite on the surface, but there was something strange about his behavior. He was possessive of the basement room, never allowed anyone near it, and once fired a delivery man on the spot for opening the door without permission. Tasha also recalled hearing strange sounds from below, faint music, a dragging noise, and once, what she thought was someone crying. She had quit shortly after. With her statement, detectives were finally able to secure a search warrant for the entire building, including the locked basement. On April 12, police returned to the shop with forensics teams and a full warrant in hand. Derek watched silently as they moved through his store, this time with purpose. They pried open the basement door, which had been reinforced with a heavy latch. The staircase was steep, the air thick with chemical odors. As they reached the bottom, the room unfolded into a dimly lit space with cold concrete floors and walls lined with soundproofing foam. There were no windows, just a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was mostly empty, no furniture, no visible equipment. But something felt wrong. In one corner, the floor tiles looked newer than the rest. A team began pulling them up. Beneath the surface, they found what they feared: blood. Not enough to suggest a body had been buried there, but enough to indicate serious injury. Samples were collected and rushed to the lab. Behind a false panel in the wall, investigators discovered a small closet-like space containing a few personal items. Among them was Ginger's purse, untouched, her ID still inside. A folder of her demo tapes lay nearby. There was also a broken necklace with a familiar pendant, a silver music note her mother later confirmed Ginger wore every day. The discovery changed everything. This was no longer a missing persons case. It was a homicide investigation. Derek Hall was arrested on the spot and taken in for questioning. He denied any involvement, claimed the basement was used by former tenants, and said he had no idea how Ginger's belongings got there. But the evidence spoke louder than his denials. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood on the basement floor was Ginger's. Detectives now believed she had been attacked or killed in that room shortly after entering the store. The fact that her body was not found only deepened the horror. The timeline, the hidden room, the discovered belongings, everything pointed to Derek. The puzzle was slowly coming together, but one major piece was still missing: what had actually happened in that basement. And WHY.AS Derek Hall sat in jail awaiting trial. Investigators began pulling back the layers of his carefully constructed life. The man who had run a quiet record shop in Las Vegas was not who he appeared to be. Underneath his calm demeanor was a history of deception and disturbing patterns that stretched across state lines. Detectives discovered that Derek had previously gone by a different name, Martin Decker, before legally changing it 5 years earlier. Under his former identity, he had lived in multiple towns across the Southwest, and in each one, a young woman had mysteriously vanished, though no cases had ever led to charges. The similarities were alarming. Each woman had been in her 20s, had red or auburn hair, and had last been seen near a music venue or independent store. In all the prior investigations, Derek had slipped through the cracks, moving on before suspicion could fully form. It was only now, with the evidence found in his basement, that a clearer picture began to emerge. A major breakthrough came when a tech unit searched Derek's home computer. Hidden behind layers of encrypted files, they discovered an active presence on obscure internet forums. Using an alias, Derek had posted long, fictionalized stories that detailed abductions and control fantasies involving women who matched Ginger's description. Even more chilling were video stills saved in a hidden folder, screenshots from what looked like surveillance footage of women walking through shopping malls, parking lots, and local coffee shops. Investigators couldn't identify all the women, but the implication was clear: Ginger was not his first target, and she might not have been his only one. The biggest discovery came from a storage unit Derek had rented under yet another name. Tucked away in a remote facility on the edge of the city, the unit appeared normal from the outside. Inside, however, police found boxes of women's clothing, wigs, and personal items. There were dozens of labeled VHS tapes, many showing grainy, handheld footage of women being watched without their knowledge. In one tape, Ginger could be seen entering the record store, confirming that Derek had planned her abduction in advance. It was no random encounter, though there was still no body. Prosecutors now had a compelling story backed by hard evidence. Derek Hall had built a fantasy world where he could control and possess women. Ginger Rios had become his latest victim, drawn in under the guise of a music opportunity. What followed in that basement likely mirrored the disturbing stories he'd written online, only this time it was real. The public response was one of horror and outrage. Media outlets began digging into Derek's past, interviewing people from his previous towns. The record store was shut down, its windows boarded, and the alley behind it became the subject of urban legend. Derek Hall, once a forgettable shop owner, was now seen as a manipulative predator with a long trail of destruction. Still, without Ginger's body, her family was left in limbo, grieving a daughter whose final moments remained a mystery. Derek Hall's trial began nearly a year after Ginger Rios disappeared, and by then, public interest in the case had reached a fever pitch. News crews camped outside the courthouse and true crime forums buzzed with speculation. Prosecutors laid out their case methodically, painting a portrait of a calculating predator who had hidden behind a storefront and a false identity for years. The evidence was damning: Ginger's blood in the basement, her personal belongings hidden behind a false wall, the disturbing online writings, and hours of voyeuristic footage found in his storage unit. Though there was no body, the case for murder was strong, and the courtroom was packed with supporters of the Rios family. Brian Rios sat in the front row every day, staring ahead with hollow eyes, clutching a worn photo of his wife. Ginger's mother and siblings attended each session, refusing to let her memory fade into a statistic. The defense tried to argue that there was no definitive proof Ginger was dead, suggesting she may have left voluntarily or suffered an unrelated accident after leaving the store. But with every witness and forensic expert, that theory crumbled. The blood patterns, the bleach traces, the hidden tape of Ginger walking into the store, everything led back to that basement. The most haunting moment of the trial came when the prosecution revealed a tape that had arrived anonymously just 2 weeks before jury selection. Mailed in a plain envelope with no return address, the tape was marked with the date, April 4th, the day Ginger vanished. On the footage, she appeared in the basement, standing nervously under a single light. She held her demo tape in one hand, the other trembling slightly. She looked off camera, clearly being directed. She didn't speak. Then the screen went black. It was short, silent, and chilling. No one knew who sent it, but experts verified its authenticity. It had been filmed with the same camcorder found in Derek's storage unit. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and evidence tampering. Derek Hall was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called him a coward and a manipulator who had robbed a young woman of her future. Though justice had been served in court, it brought little closure to Ginger's family. Her body was never found, and the question of what truly happened in that basement remained unanswered. In the months that followed, police reopened cold cases in towns where Derek had previously lived. Some families reached out, wondering if their missing daughters had also crossed paths with him. The record store was permanently shut down, the building eventually demolished. In its place now stands a memorial garden with a single plaque that reads, "In memory of Ginger Rios and those still missing." You are not forgotten. Though years have passed, the case continues to echo in documentaries and late-night broadcasts. But for Brian Rios and Ginger's family, the pain never left. Justice came, but the silence that followed was even louder.